So we're very excited tonight to introduce you to two new ARDBEG expressions. Actually, one that is making a comeback, the ARDBEG 17, and the newest ARDBEG 19, Batch 6. But I know you're not here to hear me talk. Apparently none of you are here to hear my manager, David Black, our global ambassador, talk. You've heard him talk a million times apparently. But today we're going to introduce you to a very special guest. So all we have from Scotland is ARDBEG's manager, distillery manager, Colin Gordon. So Colin.
I thought New York was a bit more rocking. Thanks very much for having me. It's been great to be back. We were here last year just for a few days and the city was absolutely bouncing. The UN were in town and it was gridlock, but I think we've caught that again. But no, it's great to be back in the Brandy library as well. We had a whistle-stop tour in Chicago yesterday and then flew in today, so it's lovely to be here. I am indeed the distillery manager at ARDBEG, so clearly when you walk the streets of Manhattan it's a bit different from walking the streets of Port Ellen at ARDBEG. There's only 3,000 people on the island, and that's quite a big island, and that's quite a busy island in Scotland. ARDBEG has been making whisky for over 200 years. 1815 we were founded. I'm only the 21st manager as well in 200 years, so next month will be my 4th year at ARDBEG. I moved there in October 2020, right in the midst of the pandemic. So there was a global search for a new manager and I was a mile down the road at Lagavulin. That worked pretty well, but yeah, I worked for Diageo for 8 years before coming up to ARDBEG. It's a very, very special place. And we've got two whiskies just to take you through tonight. So the first we've got is the ARDBEG 17. So a lot of you, we've had quite a sort of turbulent history at ARDBEG. We were, the 1980s was a particularly tough time for Scotch whisky, not just the fashion industry, the 80s were hard on. Through the 1980s we had 81 to 89, the distillery was completely closed. They overproduced, if you like, in the late 70s, and then whiskey brown spirits became quite unfashionable. A lot of people started drinking vodka and white rum. We ended up closing from 81 to 89. So right through the 80s we were shut at ARDBEG, and it was a terrible time. ARDBEG was built, there was a village there was a school and a post office and a shop, and everything pretty much disbanded. In 1989 we were bought over by Allied Distillers, and at the time Allied had Lefroy, just a couple of miles down the road from us. And they started making a little bit of spirit again and then stopping. A little bit of spirit and stopping. And in 1996 we closed again, and that could have really been the end for the distillery. But in 1997 Glenmorangie Company strode in white horses to save the day. Yes. £7.7 million, which with the current exchange rate is about $7.7 million. An absolute bargain to buy the distillery, and most of it was stock that was bought. The distillery was in a really bad way. But we were under a great leadership at the time, and with a lot of you all know obviously Dr. Bill Lumsden. Bill, who was very on the ball with wood management things, they thought they were in safe hands selling to Glenmorangie. And we've just gone from strength to strength. LVMH bought Glenmorangie in 2004, and we've had a lot of investment at the distillery and expansion, so they really have invested, and we're in a great place going forward. But in '97, when Glenmorangie bought us, they had a look at the stock profile that we had. And because we hadn't produced much through the 80s, but we produced next to nothing, we raided the stores, and this is one of the whiskies that was put together, ARDBEG 17-year-old. Now you'll all know your whiskey, I'm sure, in single malt Scotch whiskey. The age of your whiskey is the age of the youngest spirit in it, okay? So there was whiskey older than 17 years old in the original 17. There might have been 20, 21, 25-year-old ARDBEG, because the age of the youngest spirit is 17. That's what, by law, we have to put on the bottle. So ARDBEG 17 was created, and we sold it from 1997 to 2004, and it was a cult classic. We have a very passionate fan base, ARDBEG. I was in Sweden in May, and people are showing you their ARDBEG. Any ARDBEG tattoos in the house today? Really? I'm a big Jesse, as we say. But it's a really, really passionate brand, and this was one that people loved, ARDBEG 17. And the reason it was really well loved. There's a lot of old stock in it. The late 70s Ardbeg, we use a lot of peat, as you know. We're a very heavily peated single malt Scotch whisky. There's peat all over the island that is burnt to give you this lovely aromatic smoke that sticks to the malt barley before we process it. In the late 70s there wasn't as much peat coming off the moss, very wet summers like we've had this year. It's been absolutely diabolical on the island, it's just rained all summer. But if they struggled to get it off, they would just do lower peated, okay? It would be less phenolic, less smoky. So the original Ardbeg 17 had a lot of this much softer, older stock in it. And we've decided as a committee release to try and recreate the Ardbeg 17, and this is it. I've really picked up, you'll be desperate to try it. Let's have a wee nose. So on the nose, right? Softer, less of that. Ardbeg has this incredible soot and fruit thing going on, right? Really sooty ash, tar, with great citrus, smoky notes, but that 17 is much softer. Now we've actually broken our own rules with this because the original 17 that came out was chill filtered and 40% ABV. Now Ardbeg, we don't chill filter, so we always bottle above 46% ABV, we like a bit of strength. But to recreate the style of this, we have done it at 40% and chill filtered. Don't chase me out the room, try it. But that is the style. And if you notice, it's fruity, it's like peaches and melon, it's much softer. Much softer. That's a real old style Ardbeg, late 70s style Ardbeg. So we'll have a wee taste. Slange on everyone. Cheers. Mouth watering. Delicious. That is, now, it's very difficult when you try and recreate a whisky because casks change over time and things change, but we really have tried to get that original 70s softer, more delicate Ardbeg style. What do you think?
Very nice, thank you.
Really elegant.
It is, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Colin, can I ask, with Ardbeg 19, obviously it changes a little bit every year. It has somebody's impression on it, whoever is the distillery manager. Will 17 kind of change the same way, just with the stocks that you have and the barrel treatment?
Well, we're just doing it as a committee release just now, so it's not going in as the core range or anything.
Will it potentially?
Oh.
Sorry, I work for Mom and Hennessy and I like to sell more, so yes.
No, it's just now. It's a committee release. I'm sure you're all members of the Ardbeg committee.
Excuse me.
The committee is.
The 19th.
Isla, like I say, is an island of 3,000 people, and there's about 3,000 committees. Right? There's committees. So because we've been closed through the 80s, in the year 2000 we formed the Ardbeg committee to make sure we never shut our doors again, and we've got about over 200,000 members. You know, so from all over the world, people come together to share their love of Ardbeg. So this is a. You asked about peat beside me. I forget we're in New York, right? You won't burn a lot of peat here. But peat is like a partially decomposed vegetation. It's really, really wet on Isla. People think it's cold. It's not cold like New York cold in the winter. Like, we're quite mild. We've got the Gulf Stream coming up from Mexico, goes right across the Atlantic, so we actually don't really get snow and frosts, but it's just wet and mild and wet through the winter, just a lot of rain and wind. But peat is formed when you have like compressed vegetation that's submerged in water. So it doesn't break down fully into like a coal, it breaks down into peat, and Isla's full of it. So the Highlands and Islands of Scotland would traditionally burn peat, as would Ireland. There's lots and lots of peat in Ireland, but we're only 30 miles from Northern Ireland on Isla, and the southern tip of Isla's closer to Ireland than mainland Scotland. But yeah, there was lots, and it was traditionally burnt as a fuel to heat the home, but it was a great fuel to dry barley, and then they realised over time this, as the smoke was sticking to the grain, this like aromatic quality was coming through to the whiskey. So yeah, peat, there you go. Right, so there'll be more lectures like that later. Right, Ardbeg 19. So this is called the Traigh Bhan. It's Gaelic, okay? We were having a wee discussion in Chicago. We came from a Gaelic lesson last night. In Ireland, Irish, the traditional Irish language is Gaelic. If you come up to Scotland, it's Gaelic. Don't get them confused. People get very upset. Scots, they're all descended from one language hundreds and hundreds of years ago when we just jumped between the places. But Scots Gaelic, this is the Traigh Bhan 19-year-old. And Traigh, T-R-A-I-G-H, is Gaelic for a beach. And Bhan, B-H-A-N, is fair hair.
Oh.
So the very famous folk song in Irish, Sheena Bhan, blonde-haired Sheena. The usual song, you know, she leaves the man heartbroken, the usual song. But yeah, that's how you do it. But this is Traigh Bhan, so the sort of fair-haired beach, and it's just round from Portellen. Those of you who've been to Islay, we have this beach, and we named this whiskey after it, Traigh Bhan. In English, they call it the Singing Sands. It's quite famous. It's very, very beautiful. But what we've done with Traigh Bhan is it's always a slight variation in the recipe. So it's a mix of cask types, bourbon casks, because as you know, of course, the bourbon industry can only fill once, which is great for us because we take a huge amount of American oak across the Atlantic to fill. And then we also use Oloroso sherry refills as well. So ARDBEG Ugadal, which I'm sure you'll know, is a classic of our core range, where we use a lot of first fill sherry casks from Spain. Once we've used that whiskey for Ugadal, we'll fill it again and leave the casks for a number of years. So these are refill sherry casks. And then we will combine the two, ex-Oloroso sherry, ex-bourbon cask, to build the Traigh Bhan 19-year-old. Now this is batch 6, so one person from the distillery team, like I was saying there, will always pick their favourite. So we'll put together maybe 6 samples of slightly different combinations. So you might say, let's try it 80% ex-bourbon, 20% ex-sherry, etc, etc. And this year, batch 6, the initials on it is DB. You'll be pleased to know it's not David Blackmore. David didn't. It was Douglas Bowman, Dugga. Everyone's got a nickname on Islay. My head warehouseman Dugga, who's looking after the distillery for me today, actually. But Dugga is, you know, he's going to be in his bed now, right enough. But he picked, now he's got a fantastic nose, and this was his favourite combination. Okay, so batch 6, Traigh Bhan 19. So we'll have a wee nose of this. Now this is bottled again, unchilled, all natural colour ARDBEG. I should have said as well, the only additive we're allowed, obviously single malt has to be malt, barley, water and yeast, nothing else. Very, very strict regs with the Scotch Whisky Association. The only thing you can add to whiskey is caramel colouring. And that's because people used to look at a dark whiskey and think that's the best whiskey. It's nonsense, it'll be full of colouring, it doesn't mean anything. ARDBEG is natural colour, it all comes from the cask, okay? So you'll see that it's dark there from the influence of the sherry casks. We'll have a little taste. That's
It's good.
I mean, come on, we're spoiling
Yeah,
it.
I think you can taste the sherry a little.
So you get, with ARDBEG, right, you get great mouthfeel. Just that great ashy mouth coating. You feel you've had an ARDBEG for about 3 days, right? It fills them out, and that's the ashy mouth coating that you get a great, it's almost like a slightly menthol note. There's like dark fruits there, like raisiny notes coming from the sherry cask, with some notes of vanilla. It's a fantastic, you get like a slightly menthol note as well with some of these older ARDBEGs. Do you like it?
Yes, thank you.
No.
So ARDBEG 19. So yes. Any questions?
I will say when the ambassador team saw the initials DB, we were very confused. We were like, oh, did David?
I strung you all along for a whole day. You know, it was that because like we fill every cask at the distillery as well, so we bring in the casks. The majority of casks we fill are American oak ex-bourbon casks. So the ARDBEG 10 are sort of, we call it the ultimate Islay single malt. It's the classic of the core range, ARDBEG 10. We use a lot of first fill ex-bourbon casks, so they'll come to us direct from, say, Kentucky, and we'll fill them with ARDBEG. So the majority we fill is American oak, but we will fill every drop of ARDBEG at the distillery. So the casks have to come by ship to us, fill them, and we've got room for about 20,000 casks on site, 5 warehouses at the distillery. And then we've got quite a few on the mainland as well, so the casks might go, some might go to the mainland as well. Up to Glenmorangie, our sister distillery up north of Inverness, way up in the north of Scotland. Now, but the trouble is we also disgorge everything, we empty everything on Islay as well, so when we're putting together something like this, Traigh Bhan 19, batch 6, some casks will be on Islay, some will be on the mainland. So they all come back onto the ferry, over to Islay where we empty them at the distillery, and then they get filled into a tanker and sent back on the ferry to the bottling hall. So logistics is pretty challenging sometimes, especially when the ferries are, I was going to say cancelled for weather, but usually not working. A lot of issues. If you want to make a friend on Islay, just complain about ferries. But it's the thing about Dugga who selected this, what they do is every single cask we're disgorging, we're emptying. So you have these big open troughs. It's just like a big long hole in the ground with like a mesh, a filter, and you just take the bung, the sort of wooden cap of the cask out, and then they just, before they disgorge, they'll always check, they'll nose everything before it's disgorged, before it's empty, because if you have a cask that's off, if you have a sour note or anything like that, we certainly don't want it. There's no point making great spirit, and we do make a world-class spirit at ARDBEG, and then putting it in excellent wood, really expensive as well now. The price of casks shot up, well, so did everything after COVID, the prices went crazy, but you know, you want to make sure the spirit's great. So Dugga and his team will nose every single cask before it's emptied. So something like this Traigh Bhan 19, there'll be, I don't know, 200 different casks in that, also sherry and ex-American oak, so he'll work his way through. And he's got a great nose for it. Sometimes you'll say that's a beauty, that's a great cask. Let's just put that to one side and we might come back to it in the future. So he's been there since '97, so I'm pleased we can celebrate his pick tonight.
I have a question, Colin. So this is batch 6. Are there plans to make a batch 7, batch 8, and is there a cutoff where you're going to discontinue the Traigh Bhan series?
Well, we'll need to get to a point where we finish it, I think. There's. I don't think there'll be many more now. I think that's number 6. I think we've kind of worked through those who have picked the batches. My predecessor Mickey picked batch 1, and Jackie Thompson. Quite a few of you know Jackie. She's an absolute legend. She's our visitor centre manager, head of the committee, and a global icon of Scotch whisky. Jackie. She picked number 2. Bill picked batch 3, I picked batch 4, which I know was your favourite before you tried this. And then Gillian MacDonald, who's our master blender, she works in Bill's team, picked number 5, and then Dugga. So I think we're probably coming towards the end. We'll see though. Would you like it to continue?
Yes. I would
David
not
needs to pick a batch.
Do you think? Okay. Any other questions? You happy with 5? Right, well, don't be shy. Just relax, enjoy your whiskey.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Don't disappear.
Yeah, stay around, have a few drinks. Cheers on. Cheers.